We've got those things taken care of now. This is going to be nice and streamlined. You've got some really good data you're going to bring forth for our listeners. Now, your website, Religion is Science, if you go to that website, I mean, there's just a ton of information there. And with all the work and data you've compiled, you seem to have done a good job interlacing many thought-provoking subjects in a fluent manner. So, let's start from the beginning. I notice on the very top left of your website, it says, the ancients, trillions of years ago, didn't spend an enormous amount of time creating science around religion. So let's get into that. What's the main concept of this website and of your theories?
Okay, well, here's my line of thought here, and I really touched base a lot on this when I was doing my education in psychology, and that is that, no matter if it's take the trash out or, work for a living, people don't do things without a reason. And that reason is always equal to the amount of the outcome or higher. Your reward is always going to be equal to or higher than the amount of effort that you're giving into it. You might be helping somebody else out, but that you have, gratitude, it gratifies you to do it. It might be if you're taking the trash out, you don't want the house to stink. I mean, there's always some sort of reason to do it. And when I think about how close all of the religions are, I mean, they're close. They're similar. There's 34 Jesus-like characters across the world, and we're talking like born on the 25th, of a Virgin Mary.
34?
I got a list of 34 of them.
Could you go over some of those with us? Do you have that list in front of you?
I do on, we can get to it in a second. It's on one of these pages here.
Cool. We'll get to it in a minute then. Great.
Yeah, and there's so many of them, and they're just so exact. And then when you go away from religion and look into, we'll get to this too, but the mythology and all that, it's so exact and it's perfect, and it's across thousands of miles over thousands of years, supposedly before writing in a lot of cases, where there's language barriers and there's all these obstacles for people to overcome, that it just did not make sense that they would be so exact and so down to the point, and especially when they're transferring these the religions for hundreds or in some cases thousands of years by word of mouth. And like when I think back and I played, you remember that game Telephone when you were a kid and you'd whisper something in somebody's ear and then they'd whisper it, and before it got around the circle, it'd be like something completely different. When I think of that, I know that for them to spit out 10,000 lines of words and for them to end up thousands of years later to the T, like word for word, the same thing, and we're talking same sonnet, same all that stuff. It just didn't make sense. And religion was actually one of the later things that I pulled into. Because at first I was pulling up more of the ancients and those type of things, and what I was getting out of the ancient civilizations is how smart they were, like how much they had as far as their structural buildings. Obviously they moved huge rocks a long ways, and they did it in a short time, and their ability, their stonework was phenomenal. So I really started breaking that stuff down. But I have this link right here in the front, and I want you to keep this in a little bit in the back of your mind, because I have to pull from a lot of areas here, and it kind of just all ties in at the end, and it'll make more sense if we have this one out of the way. So right here, this is a. Let me turn the sound off so I can just. Well, I'll just let you watch it. So right here, if you look down, here's north right there, and there's north equal on the other one over here. And so I just wanted you to take a look and see how when I hold this up right here, you'll see the sun. And you tell me what two compasses should ever point at the sun from Washington State.
I want to know why.
So that's at like 11 o'clock in the morning.
And what do you think's causing that?
Well, okay, so on the all of the like religions and those type of things, or religions and no,
Can
I'm
you
sorry,
put
not
the
religions.
sound on mute that's on the
Yeah,
video?
I thought I could, but it's not. It's not an option. Here, let me do this. I think maybe I could. Actually, let's not mess with that. I tell you what. I'm not even gonna. Is there a way I can just play this? You let that run through and cut it off, or could read. It's kind of tough because I want you to see this part right here.
Okay.
Like I can't believe I wore those that day. That was cool. Because right there, right here, if we look, man, that's tough to see.
Well, so what's causing it though? What's causing the gravity to be so messed, or the magnetic poles to be so messed up that your compass isn't doing what it should be?
Okay, well, what it's doing first is it's pulling the South Pole towards this pole when we're up higher. But as I brought it to the ground, it turned around and pulled the north towards it. And what that is saying, it's saying that the Earth is a higher charge than the pole itself. And that's not typically something that you would see in metal, because metal it absorbs it saturates in the magnetism. So it absorbs the charge, that's why needles pull north. That's why, a magnet will stick to, a needle that'll pull in there. And really what that's saying is that there is, and this is good, I pulled up this paint because then I could just do a little drawing with my finger here and it'll make be a little easier to follow. So if here is Earth, and I do have some drawings and stuff that when we get over there that this will make sense. So there's Earth. Here is the moon. And it is 250,000 miles away. And here's the sun. And that's 93 million miles away. And now what happens is, get a little fatter line. What happens here is this, like this, this, and this. And what happens here, we have a connection with the moon. The moon has gravity that comes through. Here's its orbit that's going through us. But it's also connected to the sun. And that is going to be where our gravity comes from. There's like a trio there. And what is going on here is that as Nibiru came in, let's say this is way out there, and as this came in, here we're just gonna cut just exit that part, and I'm gonna explain it again from the from.
Well, no, that's fine. I mean, we can keep going.
Let's okay, so what happens is that there's a connection, a moon, sun, earth connection. It's kind of like a generator on let's say like a Tesla wheel, where you have a magnet spinning past copper. And as that magnet will spin past copper, or copper spins past it, it creates the electricity. And that's how like an electromagnetic works. And I'm going to just click and we're going to go to the electromagnetic so we can talk about that.
But basically what you're saying is, I mean, Nibiru, you think that Nibiru is causing these crazy magnetic fields to be all out of whack.
Yes, and if you look down here, so this is right here. This I have under December 6th. There's the sun, there's the moon, and that's Saturn. And if you look at their properties and how they go in, if you look back at like ancient Egyptians or any of those old ones, they have sun gods. They don't have a single god. They have sun gods. They have the dark god. If you look at Egypt, it's got Set, it's got Horus, it has Ra. It's got a bunch of them, and they'll actually say that they've gone through 5 times, and the sun has rose and set the same way 5 times in their existence. And what's interesting about that is when you think about this, and this is kind of a thing that pushed me over the top there, is when I was in school, they told us that, the sun's been around for 5 billion years. It's going to be around another 5 billion years, 4 billion years, something like that. And so that's a long time. It's something that we wouldn't really worry about it. But if you look at the half-lives and, what really started questioning me or making me ask the questions is the fact that I have pictures of Piri Reis, and his maps are showing his maps show a lot of things where, like, the maps are they're not very old. They're only about 500 years old. They were written in the early 1500s, and what they show is that some of these, as you can see right here on the south part right here, is it shows that South America is connected. They're real close. A lot of times they'll have the Antarctica at the side a little bit. But they're perfectly drawn. And for us to have the maps perfectly drawn of Antarctica in 1513, and supposedly it was off about 20 other maps. And what that's saying to me is that Antarctica was not where it is now at this time, because we did not have the technology to do this until the 1950s. And there's not really a way to say that, yes, your map is drawn perfectly, but it is out of place or this and that. Like, it was drawn perfectly, and it was covered in miles of ice. And in my eyes, in order to do that, it had to not be covered with ice, A, or B, you had to, have, you had to not, you had to have the technology greater than what we have today. One of the two had to take effect. I don't see how that would be possible to have that without it. And, when you look at these, I'm going to look into this ice age, because I think it all ties into that Nibiru, Planet X. Everybody kind of wants to see where that's going, because the government has, NASA did before it was part of the government. It said a lot of things.
Let me jump in here real quick, Tyler.
Okay.
Do you think that we're getting pretty close to a cataclysmic type pole shift event right now?
Oh, extremely close. And it's more than just the earthquakes and the volcanoes and, everything else that would happen if you twisted their entire core. It's more than that. And it's the same reason why the pole is flipping. Because it's not that the pole flipped so much that is why our magnetic pole moved. It's because our main magnetic driver, the reason that we have the like the oceanic currents and all that stuff, is the moon pulls our tides. And the moon is magnetic. It's there's a time before the moon. It's said a lot of times in I think the Mayans might have said it, but Egypt said it.
Socrates talked about it.
Yeah. So there was a time before the moon, and then there's also this time where Mars got called the god of war, right? And
it's still called the god of war.
Right. Well, I mean, but it's called that across the board in every single civilization that's there. And I have a video on that, and it actually shows, I don't know, it probably shows at least 10 or 12, like all the way down to our Native Americans. It shows that he's called the god of war. And for that to happen, I would imagine that there would have to be some sort of event that let the world know that you were the god of war. It is plug this in. It is
And I got to jump in here real quick
Yeah.
because one of the things that I've noticed when I do broadcasts on Nibiru or Planet X is the trolls just come out of the woodwork. I mean, and I do some pretty controversial shows. We have whistleblowers on. We've got I've talked to doctors or people that used to be doctors and lost their license because they came out and said vaccines were, pretty much detrimental to the whole archetype of humans, with the smallpox vaccines and everything, with the stuff they put in there that causes generational side effects. But that's a whole other issue. But regardless, the Nibiru topics seem to just bring out more passion and anger on all sides of the spectrum. And whether, obviously there's trolls out there. I think there's a lot of people out there that are genuine when they say the things that they do. And I'll tell you, I've done multiple broadcasts on Nibiru, and I'm still, neutral on the topic. I don't know either way. I'm not convinced either way. And I've seen many pictures and that look like there's definitely something there, and have been given a lot of evidence, but I'm still neutral on it. So with what you're talking about, this gravitational stuff, and the possibility of there being a huge cataclysm here shortly, kind of like in the movie 2012, what's some real solid evidence that you could point to? And that magnetic stuff you're showing us, that's pretty cool. But what else would you say for the naysayers out there? And another thing I just want to throw out there also, folks, is do you remember 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you'd look up in the skies and you'd see these X's and checkerboard patterns, and you'd be like, wow, what is that? Is that just contrails? And then you start to do some research and you find out it's geoengineering and they're chemtrails, and people start to blog about it and write about it and put videos up on it. And guess what? All sorts of people come out and say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. That's not true. That's not real. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. And guess what? Chemtrails and geoengineering is an open fact now. They talk about it on the Weather Channel. So could it be there? It very possibly could be. So give us some more evidence that you think could take the naysayer or somebody that really genuinely wants to know the truth, but they're skeptical because they don't feel like they have enough data.
Sure. Here's one that I pulled up, and when I noticed that a lot of the stuff that I see, it will switch around names and stuff, keep us guessing. They don't want to give all the information in one sitting, and there's a long time when I'm sitting here, and this has probably been one of the toughest battles for me is, what's the intent of governments in this case? I mean, there's a point where, did they blow up the trade centers, towers, let's say, and there's a point there where
Those terrorists with magical box cutters.
right, and I don't know if you saw that thing of Putin throwing the United States under, but I've said that for a while, and I'm excited to go home and tell my dad that I was right, because he hates to hear that. But there's you know the, in that case where with the twin towers, let's say that it got bombed by the United States, or somebody that we were involved, or we did it ourselves. A couple thousand people's lives, it is a very sad thing. But if if there's an astronomical event that's going to happen, and in order to smuggle, let's say, trillions of dollars of warfare money to a space program to divert something to save the planet, is it worth the fear of 8 billion people to sacrifice people's lives? And it's hard for me to say no on that. And it's sad, and I understand that it's not fair for a lot of people. But if to make those decisions, you have to be in that position. And I tried for a long time to give them the benefit of the doubt, but as I'm noticing these things that are happening faster and faster and closer, and the planetary events that are happening, it's really tough for me to say that we're not at this point where they're being selfish and it's not fair to the United States or not fair to the world to not share it, because you see 2012 and it just happened on everybody, and I see these things coming down to a point, and there are really it's going down the checklist to a T, and this summer we had crop circles, and if you want to see there's a crop circle specialist guy. His name's Amu or Abu, and he's really good. He called one of the planets Earth because it had something circling it with a ring. I think that was actually Saturn, but because it showed Mars, and Mars has moons, and it didn't show its circles. But so the thing is that it showed an alignment, and then about a 4-week period later, it showed another alignment. And so cross-referenced those, looked it up. In November 6th, it shows the first alignment, and it's almost like we could see it at that point is what it was showing, and that's what I think his name's Abu, and he is really good. But that's what he showed.
Have you seen a Navy commercial recently?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'm bringing this up because the most recent Navy commercial that I have seen, at the beginning of the commercial, there's this giant red circular object. It looks like the red planet, kind of like Nibiru, what you would think of. Okay. And then it zooms out, and as it zooms out, you'll notice that it's like a red pinhead that's just zoomed in, and there's a whole bunch of them. And then you'll see that there's other like destroyers and Navy ships, and it's on the water, and it kind of zooms out. But the way that it's done, if you look at the video footage and the camera angle, when this broadcast is over, just check it out for a minute and tell me later what your opinion is. And for those that are listening to this broadcast, just type in Navy Nibiru commercial, and I'm sure it'll pull up on Google. And it's just fascinating because it looks like the red planet, and it zooms out, and I'm wondering, is this some type of subliminal messaging, whether it's true or isn't, just to get the stimuli going? It was quite fascinating.
Yeah, they have those things like the power of 10, and that it had a similar video where it showed where it was going like all the way into the power of 10, and when it was going all the way in, it would actually like zoom down into your blood cell, like the smallest atom, and before you zoomed all the way out, it went from like as fast as a sprinter could run in 10 seconds, and then it was like a jet plane in 10, it got faster and faster as it picked up pace there. It really it made you visualize how big the world could be, and then it be nothing. And I do have some of my thoughts that are on that. Let's I want to touch base on this for the people that are skeptical about the Nibiru or the planet or what it really is, or if it's there. But in the Actually, let's go look at a picture because I have a bunch of this on this. So in the 1950s, they actually showed that NASA did. They had pictures of this planet that they had found. They had what did I say? They had Pioneer 10 and 11. They were both completely created over finding a planetary object that they didn't know where it was at, or that they had feelings of it out there. They could see the stuff, or they had the satellites had the pull, the energy. They could tell that something was there, but they couldn't tell exactly what it was. So they made sorry, I know it's right in here. They set up an entire division to go out there and look for this planet, and by 1980, there's this thing on Mars. By 1982, December 1982, they had pulled up. They had pulled up that they had found this object. So they had sent Pioneer 10 and 11 out, and so they cross-referenced their radio signal and could tell by their draw that they were getting pulled, in different directions, because they got shot off in different directions, and they had kind of like a cross-reference pull. And so they could tell kind of where it was at. And so they knew 20 years ago, they posted all this stuff. If you want to look this up, it's look up NASA's post in December 30th, 1982. And then like a week later, they withdrew everything. And my thoughts on that is that they drew everything because they pulled up the actual course of where it was supposed to go. So they had the initial results. They pulled them up a little bit later, you could kind of have a line. And when they pulled that up, they actually had a very close encounter with Earth, and so they didn't want to cause the extra fear, whether that or the government stepped in and said something. They didn't want to cause extra panic. They withdrew everything, and nothing else was really said from then on, if you recall. But that they had a big surge, it was real public, and then it was gone, and nobody heard anything about it.
Well, there's been multiple, leaks in different sources, different government bodies, commercial bodies that have talked about a Planet X type.
Right, and it's hard because I see, when I look up all these files, I see how they drop, and it's really kind of like on a keystone. It falls, and it makes sense. You needed it right here. At 2012, religion was going to a crisis. All of a sudden, we found Jesus 12 feet from a billion people pray every year. In order for them to fall in this like perfect line, some of it has to be a little bit planned. People are doubting, the sea scrolls and this and that. All of a sudden, we get to see them for the first time ever. Real recently, I feel like they're pulling cards when they need to be pulled. But right here, I have Hercules. And
yeah, where's this article from?
This is from a Department of Physics and Arts. This is you pull this up if you had Cornell or any of the top science there, CERN's database, any of those. But this is a top. There's.
Can you scroll down on the document?
Scroll down and let you take a look, and let you read it. So what this is saying is, there is, if you look up at the top, it goes the low mass ratio contact binary system, and so at that point, binary, it's a dual system with us, and it's called Hercules. Well, you pull up. We're gonna go in a second, and I'm gonna show you how the magnetics on this really tie in, because gold, God, and the sun in every single civilization you can go to are the same symbols. And if you run like on an electromagnetic
most
motor,
banks use a sun symbol also, Tyler.
What's that?
Almost every single bank and many credit unions use a sun symbol also.
And if they're using a gold symbol, it makes sense as well. And if you look right here, there's the mass of the sun. So this system has 1.8 masses of the sun, and it is there's three of them. We got mass 1, mass 2, and radius 1, radius 2. So there's two. This is the 2 units. The third one is actually going to be either Saturn or the moon. In turn, we can call it 3 or 4. But when we talk about the event that Mars became the god of war, and the time before the moon, when we look at this I'm gonna skip ahead and we can come back to this just because it ties it in right here. Now, when we look at the Antichrist, the devil, the Revelations, all that stuff, it's called. He's got a billion different names, and there's a ton of stuff that he's called. The crescent moon is considered Lucifer, all that, and in all the religions it's something else. But now, if you think of the electromagnetic scale, right? It's Jesus is always considered the light, and in all 34 of those, when we go over there, it's all Jesus is the light. He's the positive, the shining, the bringer of the light is the Antichrist, or the bringer of dawn, the bringer of the light, whatever he is. And that's when you look at the electromagnetic scale, which it's got waves in it, and here, I'm going to click on a picture for you. So right here, this is what an electromagnetic scale looks like. So as you have the electricity going up in red and it goes down, you have like a shadow of the magnetism. And it kind of is it's a mirrored image of it. And so as the electricity would grow, the magnetism would grow. So as the light would grow, you would have a spike in the other direction there a little bit. And, it doesn't really, I mean, you can't have one without the other. Um, you can bend it, you can pull it around, you can do a lot of things. Actually, brass in religion is one of the only properties that lets electricity through and snares the magnetism. It's got a special property, and this will make sense when we get there. But so I'm going to snap back and look at this. So here is the magnetic properties of the magnetic elements. This is a rare. I mean, this is all the magnetic elements that there is. And if you go across these, 14 of them here, they're founded by the same. I have the founders here on the right. So if you look over here, the same people that founded them, it's almost all the same name. And when I was pulling these up, because I believe that, there was a tie between the light with electricity and magnetism, just kind of the way I think it. And when I think of a snake, I think of it squeezing. I think of the split tongue as having two directions or poles. And because my, working with electromagnetics for a long period of time, that I could see some characteristics that really tied in. So it sent me down this path. And so you can check all these facts and that they actually line up like to a T. But so in all the religions, you always have somebody that's like an apostle, or, more of a little bit of a bad dude that there's kind of goes through some rough times. Like in Christianity, it was Paul. We had Mark, we had Theodore. It depended who it was, and that person always had like a twin, or there was some sort of duality there, and we'll go through some of those pictures in a second as soon as we get done talking here. But when I pulled up the founders of all of these magnetic elements that were discovered, first of all, they were all discovered in the late 1800s for the most part, early 1900s. But if you look, it's Paul, Emily, and not only that, but when energy has it mates, and you have to have a clockwise spin and a counterclockwise spin, and they kind of twist into each other like a corkscrew. And they'll either be going centrifugal, which means that they're going towards the center and they're tightening up, or they'll be spinning outwards. And when they do that, they're actually losing it and becoming radiation. Robert Otay is a great guy to look at on that. He's funny. He says it how it is. He'll go ahead and let everybody know how he feels, and I think it's great. But
Right.
So look over here on the right. We got Paul, Emily. We have Theodore, and there's kind of the same names here. But then if you look at where they're from, and this really caught my eye. We have born in Stockholm. They were born in Stockholm. They died in Stockholm. And so like I was like, what's going on with Stockholm here? And what that did for me is it opened up, it let me take a look at what I was really looking at, and what I found is that the Gittys Codex was from Stockholm. And so I was trying to look at the two. And it's really like I pulled a straw hat out of a bag of Cheerios, and it wouldn't really make sense unless you'd studied the electromagnetic scale and how this was lining up. But when I saw this beetle and how it lines up, and then if you look right here with the world, and you see those lines that they're lining up with our magnetic field, it kind of tied in. But so I started here. I put element 66 on the left, element 67 on the right. And if we go down this, I just want to compare some of the electromagnetic field properties to religion and the symbolism here with this beetle. At first, when helium was discovered, it was named element X, and that was, obviously that would be a real fast trigger and have you kind of raise an eyebrow at it. But found by Paul, Emily, it's named after the apostle. It's got a male-female duality name, and that's people could be like, oh, hey, that's just a chance. That's not really a big deal. But as we go down to the bottom, and you guys can look through that if you care to, you know, we have like the spec sheet of helium. Now we're talking the atomic weight of helium, the mineral, or I'm sorry, the element is 164.9303. And the weight of the Gittith Codex, the book of the Bible, that was written 800 years before that, or 700 years before that, is actually the exact same, 165 pounds. The dimensions match the density. I mean, these things are extreme characteristics. Then you go over here into the obituary of the person that founded it, and we're talking. It has, he started a wine business, and if you look back on the sun god like Apollo, where Dionysus or Apollyon, they were always the drunk, the one that went partying, all that. And he said they needed all of the energies of the family to keep things going. They were traveling in wine. Madam, the soup is devilishly hot. And if you look up here, it's the occurrence or not occurrence, one or the other. It's really a bipolar situation, and it's fact for fact. I mean, you don't get to the 10,000th of a or 7/10,000ths of a number just by chance, and weight, and where they're from, and what they do. And if you look at the main purpose for these elements, they're to take you shoot a little charge and you use the magnetic property to suck the neutron out, like you're stealing the soul.
So you're linking all this to the Antichrist, essentially.
Yes, the characteristics of the devil, in all religions, I did that by the shape A. I mean, we can look at the shape here on the bird. You got the apple, you got the beetle, we have the fruit of knowledge. All those things, they're all the same shape. They all have this shape. If you looked at it, cut this world in half, cut this beetle in half, you have the same thing. If you cut an apple in half, what do you have? The same thing. You have, let's go back here to the beginning so I can okay, so here's a couple of them. We have the Crab Nebula. It's the same thing. It's this is the natural way that force planes out with the electromagnetic scale. If you look at it, I know a lot of people want to look very, very literally into the Bible and say it was a real story and all this, and I'm not saying that it's not important, and I'm not saying that there's not a higher power, but I'm saying is that there's things in there that you need to look more scientifically, and it's more advanced than what anything that we can relate to in this time. I mean, it's fascinating how perfect it is. This is a picture off of CERN where they separated the North and South poles. It looks the exact same way. And this is 2015 technology. I mean, if you look at these people, this is on the side right here. This is solid stone out in this is the Jainism temple, and if you look at it, it's phenomenal. And I want to touch base on something that's going to sound it's a little bit out there and a little bit almost childish to look at some of these in this way, but I found out so much by doing this. And Rex, do you remember? Did you ever use like shoot a negative or do an inverse or change the color pitch on any pictures?
Sure.
Okay, so like this one, for instance, I'm gonna click over to Paul Emily. He is the one that founded a bunch of that. Let's touch base on this real quick on the way while we're over there. But so this is a bunch of different religions. They always have this Antichrist kind of character. And if you look at these, that's not Jesus, and they're exact opposites of each other. They kind of mirror each other, right?
Is this a part of the 34 that you were discussing?
Yes. There's a whole list of them. Like, these are all characters. This is all characters in different. I think this right here is Marcus, but they're some of them they're real similar, and you'll see some of these guys. They're not Jesus. They're twins. They're apostles. They're in different religions. They have the same first name, sometimes a second name, you know. But they match their first name. They do have the same characteristics. And really, what I've discovered over the time, like, I mean, it's obvious these guys are meant to be twins. It's obvious that, you know, they're meant to be in certain ways, that, or they're meant to be seen. Now I'm going down here to click on the next one real quick. So here's what I was going to initially. Here's Paul Emily, and let's look at some of the symbolism. And when I inverted and twisted some stuff around, you know, I really came across a lot. Now here's a picture of him. It originally looked like this guy over here on the right, and when I changed some of the colors and I zoomed in, and hey, I encourage, this is what's going to sound out there a little bit. What you see right here in the nighttime is going to be different than what you'll see in the daytime. And it's not, what it has to do with is how the light goes through your you know, the biophotonics of the chemistry of your body. So as a light ray would go through your head, it's going to affect you by different frequencies that travel. And the sun travels, you know, it's going to be blocked by the earth at this point, but in the daytime, it's going to look different. And I've done some research on that, and I'll show you, because right now, can you see like a little guy in a hat right here on the left?
Well, yes, I can. It looks like almost like a baboon head.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And then I see this like snake looking, or I read below it said water dog. It looks kind of
Right
like a snake dog kind of thing. That's interesting.
This guy, okay, and then we see right here. Now flip that upside down. Do you see a duck eye right here in his mouth? Let's I have
I see the duck. Yeah, I see the duck.
And that there's the duck's face flipped over right here. So I mean that's pretty clear, is it not?
But what's the symbology with the duck?
The duck is written over there in the Chinese and Hindu. It's actually a new beginning. And if you zoom in right here, if you look, there's another duck, but he's like a sleeping one. And this one I cut and put in, and it was right there. You kind of see I built into the chin, and you have a face upside down with a boy's head on it. Right? And this is, I'm not just going to turn pictures and leave it like that, but what I'm saying is, as the magnetic frequency of the planets changes, and it's night and day, and we go through these stages, this exact footing that you'll look at right now will be different to you tomorrow. And I'm talking everything that you see, it's all on perception. It's going to be 100% different. And it's way easier to have somebody tell you that than to look at it tomorrow and say somebody changed it and you don't get it, because I have pictures that I've printed out that, you know, that change all the time, and trying to solve that yourself by telling people that they're changing is not the way to go. I promise you that. You'll never want to do that. But I challenge you to take a look at this in the morning, in the light, take a very close look at a lot of these things. Like up here, we have like an elf head, or I don't know, it looks like somebody off Lord of the Rings kind of looking to the left to me. Now, it's going to look different to me because I sleep under pyramids and you don't. Probably. I mean, I don't know for sure. But like you can see up here in the top right, you see like a guy smoking, looking to the left? Or do you see, I mean, you're going to see some different things than me, but it's all.
And here's the thing too, Tyler. I mean, I do see those things, but you know, once again, you can come up with all sorts of cool stuff that you can find in a picture like that whether that was intentional or not, who knows? Whether that guy put that in there intentionally. I mean, it's kind of like looking at the clouds and saying, wow, man, that one looks like a bowl constructor.
No, I understand that completely. And I do get it. And because a lot of people will pull stuff out that I'll be like, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I do understand that, but I'll challenge you this. I'm going to have a page set up here probably by the time this is posted, where I'll have the different pictures set up, like, any of, oops, not that one, but anyway, I'll have some ancient civilization pictures, and I can pull them up, and they're crazy different. The amount of difference that you have on there is it's out there. I have this devil picture, and I'll send that to you as soon as we're done, where I actually inverted it. And when you invert it, it was definitely written before the Twin Towers,
Can
before
you
the
show
stuff.
it to us now? Do you have it?
It's on my phone.
Okay, no worries. We'll get to it
So
later.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll send it to you here right when I'm done. It won't be a long process. But it it shows the Twin Towers when it's turned one way. It shows the devil turning into Twin Towers, getting kicked in the face by a lady, and the buildings are burning. You got Twin Towers burning, and you have a smaller building burning. You hit it from a slightly different angle. You have, you have like all the. It goes through like these different phases, and it shows that kind of the devil can go from a nice guy to a terrible guy. And what's important about this is, and now we're going to tie this back into the energy scale here. When we have energy, it spirals like we were talking about, and it looks kind of like this. So one of your directions is going to be going north, or spinning one way, and the other one's going to absorb it and spin the other way. Now, that's where you're going to get your male and female energy, and it's going to tie into, the duality. You can't have, if you look at the planetary mythologies of the planets, you have, you always have Venus is different than Mars, is the opposite sex. Some of them have the male and female twisted the other way, some don't. But it has to do with what's absorbent to the other. You can't push a north and south pole into each other. They will, they'll fight each other. And here's a picture. This is written in the 70s, or I'm sorry, the Renaissance time. If you look at this guy right here, and I don't know how your perception is right this second, but if you tilt this screen back or any of that, you'll see like a cross right through here. You'll have like another little Y. It's like a carbon atom type thing. And if you translate all of these lines, I mean, you can read what it does, but you can see it. You can actually see the symbolism. We got the 3-to-1. That's a 3-to-1 numerology. Is actually NASA's fastest technology in space to be faster than light. And you're not really passing the speed of light. You're changing time for it to be like that or to see like that. Now, if you look at the moons over their heads, it's important. If you look at the dual face, it's important. If you read that time, this is a time clock. We're stronger together than apart. If you look how many facts, I'm gonna leave that kind of for them if y'all want to take a look at it. But the line for line items that just continue to pictate and to show that you have the electromagnetic scale separated into a duality is astronomical. It is a ton. And if we look at this shape right here, how this spins in, this is going to be important to this Nibiru thing. So Antarctica was drawn way up the side of South America, and not very long ago. You can look up the Piri-Reis, any of those maps, and it'll kind of show it that it was moved away. It was perfectly drawn, but I wrote NOAA, and NOAA, I wrote them about why is all the ocean floors the same temperature, was at exactly 0 degrees Celsius. No matter if it was the deepest ocean in the Marianas Trench or if it was in the Atlantic Ocean, 0 degrees Celsius. And my thoughts on that were, once water gets pushed to a certain frequency or a certain pressure, it becomes magnetic. It becomes frozen. It doesn't expand and float. And so I thought that maybe all the ocean floors were pushed down and frozen solid. And, and that's going to go back to the Ice Age. The Landshap event is something that I found. They said that the 780,000 years ago was the last Ice Age. Well, no, it's not. They suggest this is about 40,000 years ago. But the fact is that they carbon date stuff. They test the ice in Antarctica to do it. And if Antarctica was moved, it would not have been frozen that long ago. So it would be real tough to tell exactly what's going on there. And
how long ago do you think it happened then?
I think it was very recent at most, the 38,000 years ago. But I'm probably going to guess, in the last 8,000 years, Yeah, I believe that it was one of the events that happened that wiped out either the Sumerians or, you know, um, or the last one in 1500 AD is, or BC is what we have it as. And if you look at these charts, how the temperatures rise and everything goes up and up and up. I mean, this is a big drastic event that's going on right there. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the driving force. Here's one that shows right here. It shows, you have temperature over here. You got CO2. They all spiking together. You have the methane. You got all these things that are going up and spiking together. And what it looks like to me is that they obviously, you can't say one drives the other, but you could say that they have a common force that drives them. And we have, when I wrote NOAA and wrote them about the seafloor, they sent me back it's called a gold pass or something, where I could go check out their scientific reports. And what I found there was that there's 29,000 billion tons of methane hydrate on the planet Earth. And if you know anything about methane, it boils at an extremely low temperature. But under 1 atmospheric pressure, it can stay frozen if created that way, like under ice or water, or as plants decay, it'll turn into this, and it can turn into a solid methane. And at 1, or it's like 2 atmospheric pressures, it can stay frozen at 32 degrees. So we have 29,000 billion tons of this, but at a couple degrees above absolute, or above frozen, so at like 30, 2-3 degrees Celsius, it needs 50 atmospheric pressures to hold it down as a solid. And so what happens, this is going to make sense. Have you heard about the the woolly mammoths that froze with food in their mouth?
Right. Yes.
Okay, so those, and that's, you freeze a woolly mammoth as a popsicle instantly. I mean, you put some pressure there. That's a lot of energy taken. And but it's happened several times. We've had over 1 million animals in Alaska had it. And so put this together. So let's say something warms up the world. And so when it turns from a solid to a gas, it expands 170 some times. And instantly, when it uses that energy to expand that fast, it has to drop its temperature to negative 161 degrees Celsius as its vapor point. So when that happens, you're talking about an extreme, compounded effect, because now it's blowing up all the stuff on the bottom. When oil drillers get into it, I mean, they're worried about sinking ships in it, because it expands fast enough to, lower the density of the water below you to less than that of the boat. And it happens fast. And so it's shooting out this freezing cold air extremely fast. And that's where you'll get your, day after tomorrow effect. That movie?
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's what came to mind while you were discussing this.
Yeah, and there's not, and it happens, and it happened in the 1800s, where 3,000 tons of it, and we have 29,000 billion tons, got released in Europe in the 1800s, dropped the global temperature 20 degrees for 7 years. I mean, it's drastic. And so if you look at these things, this is my opinion, is that so they have these spikes every so many, here's the years, every so many years. I mean, that's all 125,000 years, 100,000 years, some apart. And I think because they're doing ice core samples to get these testings, that they're way off. And I think that these are all squished down to a planetary cycle of, let's say, planet X. Because if you moved Antarctica, and if you saw how fast it went south, that it has to have some sort of south magnetic pull. Because if you look up here, now up here is where the old South Pole used to be, and it moved 5 times in the 40,000 years that they have it, and this is the poles as they kind of got chased around. They moved quite a bit, and what it would make sense, because Antarctica was pulled up the side more over here. It was close to Africa. You can kind of see how it fit in. I mean, we're missing an Atlantis up there. We're also missing the Lemuria somewhere over here. And it just makes sense to me that those poles probably swayed this entire planet. And I have, if you take a look later, that magnetic pole, where I had the two compasses and moved it over, it actually splits. You know, it pulls the pole one way, it'll let it go the other way. And I have like 5 or 6 compasses, and a lot of them will pull exactly 180 degrees opposite of each other. And if it doesn't do it at your house, know that, the ground is saturated, and, the shape of the rocks around you, it's all going to have an effect. And I live on top of a hill by water, so it'll draw it away from it. You can never move a magnetic force, but you can bend it. And that's how, you can deal with Tesla and John CERN things, is you can bend the magnetic field away from something. You can't stop it with 100 feet of lead. And actually, lead stops magnetism about as much as air stops it. It just doesn't work. So these poles are moving all over. Now, let's imagine this. Those elements that I showed you originally was called element X. It's highly magnetic. It can't be seen. Now, a magnet, when you think about mass of a planet, I mean, what are you going to do to weigh that, or to say that this one has a bigger force than the other? Because if you're a magnet and you're linked on 2 planets, you're pulling them towards you. I mean, how do you judge mass at that point? You really can't in my eyes, because you're talking about floating it in a space. You're talking about grabbing 2 planets and pulling them into each other. I mean, you have ants that lift 50 times their body weight. It's kind of like that same scenario, where if you had a pound on Earth, a pound of the world's strongest magnet, and a pound of steel, what's going to feel like it weighs more when it's pulling on 2 things?
Right.
And so we can't see it, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at that Hercules report, and there's several other ones.
Okay, let me jump back to that Hercules report if I can real quick. Now,
okay.
What physics department did that come out of?
Faculty of Arts and Science. Here it says on the side. I'm
just looking at the university. Okay, so there it is, folks. Scroll it up a little bit. You just pass it if you would, please.
Sure.
So, folks, for those that want to read this article, you can actually pick it up. It's called the Ansekizmart University, and it looks like this is in Turkey, where it's called the Low Mass Ratio Contact Binary System V728 Hercules. So, okay, thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things would be a little tougher to find in the United States, but you can still find them if you know the exact names of them. So, and one thing about this, let's see how easy it is to find. Now, it talked about...
does it say how close it is?
It's close.
Does it say in there, in the article?
I don't know exactly where. I know that it gave a time limit first initially, that this... And I'll scroll through if anybody wants to take a look. But
yeah, that'd be great.
I'll just do that, and they could slow it down or take a screenshot. But what it did say, and I have several of these, but one of them is it gave. Do you remember that hieroglyph, or I'm sorry, the crop circle in November, and it gave this period of 4 weeks, and then so it was around December 6th when that one was supposed to go, and then it showed something else, and so I thought at that point, December 6th, it was going to get pretty rowdy, and what I noticed is that sure enough, early November happened, and they found a planetary object entering our solar system, and they gave it like 5 years to get by Jupiter. And so what happened on December is when we lined up into the biggest natural alignment that you could ever imagine, and I'm going to let them get this and then click over to the other picture. But there was an alignment where Saturn's rings opened up to the center of the Milky Way. It went through Pluto on the way. It nailed the Milky Way. It was lined up with the sun, our moon, our Earth. I think it was Neptune behind us. Uranus was to our left, and to our right at 90 degrees was Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury was next to the sun. So all 9 of our planets, or 8 and a dwarf planet, were all lined up like that on a cross with us in the middle. And we're pointing at the Milky Way. And just so happens that lines up on Hanukkah. They happen for a reason, these hotels or these holidays. And they're so that we don't forget these things. Now, sure enough, when that lined up, it charged the charge from the center of the Milky Way through Saturn's rings. If you shoot magnetism through a ring, it amplifies it. Went through the sun, through our moon, through us, and it ended up snagging that object that was supposed to be here in 5 years, or be to Jupiter in 5 years. And if you look at, there's some reports on that, but it made us a huge electromagnet, and it jerked this planet that was entering our solar system at like Mach 1,000,000. I mean, it was going fast, and it was flying straight towards us. So it made it an electromagnet, and it was flying in. And when it did that, it sped up its pace drastically, and to the point where by December 23rd is when I noticed the pole was letting go, or it was starting to change. And what had happened at that point is we are a ferromagnet. So we are not magnetic by ourselves, but we need a magnet to, in turn, become magnet. And so we can become a temporary magnet with a magnet linked on us. Well, the moon is magnetic, and it pulls our tides, and it gives us the energy from the sun. Without the moon, it would, we wouldn't be getting the same amount of energy. It'd be like twisting the copper but not really have a magnetic field. It would be like twisting a pencil next to it. It wouldn't have the benefits that it does. And so when the magnetic field came in and it grabbed us, or grabbed the moon, or whoever it grabbed, the moon is latched onto us because we are, like a piece of steel sitting there. But if you have a stronger magnet than the moon, and you grab the moon, soon as the moon is fully saturated, it can't hold the Earth anymore. It's going to turn around and grab Nibiru, or whatever planet it is, and it's going to grab it because it gets a better grip on that planet. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely it does. And you're putting it together in a pretty realistic manner for somebody that might not have much information on the magnetic side of things, except for what they hear about in talk shows and stuff. So I like the way you're putting it together scientifically. I like this document that you're presenting to us. And what else do you got on Nibiru?
Okay. Well, let me just to explain it. I'll show you this a little bit here in the front. So let's say it's like this. So here's the sun, Earth, moon, and this right here is your planet X. So as this energy would come through this Earth, through the sun, it's going to ping, 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 and it's going to go up here, and it's going to snag planet X. Now, planet X is pulling not only against us, because, I've done some experimenting on some of the tests where I'd put a magnet here, and let's say a magnet at the sun. And if I removed the magnet at the sun, it might not reach. But when I put this one in the back, and let's say the sun stops at the Earth or moon, and that's as far as it goes, it will leapfrog off of it and extend all of their force further out. And so when the planets all lined up, it generated a longer reach, and it grabbed it, a bigger strength, and grabbed it. And it wasn't just on us. It wasn't the planetary, the sun. It was the Milky Way's center. And if you read that report or any of them, you'll notice that this Nibiru planet X, they say it's so big, but it's not. Now, there's a big cloud that follows it around, and ironically, it's a neutron star, which is a magnet, and that it has a giant cloud that follows it because it's covered in iron and water. Well, what are we missing on Mars that makes sense? Iron and water. It used to supposedly, been livable. It does not have a magnetic field. It has a huge scar in it. And if you push two magnets together very strong, or you put two positive forces together, you're going to have an arc. Well, my thoughts on that is that that's where the moon came from, was the spark that blew and hurt Mars. That this planet goes through a cycle. That our asteroid belt is made from all the planets that get pushed out to that point. Because if you looked at the sun, the newest planets, if you take gold, it would decay into Mercury, which is our newest planet, which would, turn into a Venus, and then where we're at, and then finally get to Mars. And as you become Mars, you become more of a magnet, ferromagnetic material, where this, devil planet X would come by and hit you on the X and crossroads and blow you apart and make an asteroid belt. And then you would lose your your field to like the gas planets, because if you took away your magnetic charge, you're not going to hold a gravity. Gravity does not go off mass. It's funny. Do you know that Miko Kuku, that he's the shoot? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know you're talking about Miko.
Miko, and I have this, I listened to a 3-hour recording on him the other day, and partway through I heard this. He goes, well, all those physicists, they're wrong when they were talking about gravity. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. Because, gravity, it pulls you into if you look at, say, the moon, right, or Earth right here, it would go from the outside of this sun, and it will cross, and wherever it crosses at the size of the Earth, it's going to lock you in. And that's why the bigger the planet, the further out it goes. And Mars should be bigger than us, but it's smaller. If you look at all the other planets, they go in order. Now that some will say Jupiter's the biggest planet, yes, but Saturn's rings make that magnetic field expand, so it locks it out. And what's a
There's
good,
so much mysticism that surrounds Saturn and its rings and the the hexagon and everything. It's incredible.
what I don't get is that they claim they know so much, or can zoom in on these pictures, and I mean, it's hard to even zoom in on the moon, and the moon is only, 250,000 miles away. Now, Saturn's 800 million miles, and it's not about who's got the better telescope, because it's so far and the world turns so fast.
It's interesting. I just got to jump in here real quick, because
Yep.
there's actually a camera that you can buy now that's got this just ridiculous zoom. I think it's like a 500 and something times zoom, and